Hello, everyone. Getting back to doing some nice reaction videos. Just did my hair, and I brought that up because, just for the video, because I like to be presentable. I like to get presentable whenever I'm working, because it's like a mode of being, and in some sense, taking charge of your presentation is a very, very key thing in integrating your shadow. Like lots of people have I don't know, they just never experiment with their look. They never experiment stylistically, and I think that it's the result of repression. So without further ado, let's get back to where we were yesterday, but starting a little bit earlier, simply because this is the most replayed part. So I want to actually wait. Conflict and growth. Nah, I'll go back to this is most replayed. This is also most replayed. Okay, let's just go here. I think this is where we were.
Meet your next pillow.
God.
Why do we make our pillow in the shape of a cube? I'll tell you.
You go to someone's house and you want to have a conversation, you just met them, and your children embarrass you to death, and you think you're not going to get resentful about that?
Right.
And you think you're not going to take, and so here's how people would take it out on their kids. So imagine that happens. Now you go home and you're pissed right off, but you're not going to let yourself know that because you're such a nice person.
Yeah, people do that all the time. I do that too. I have to constantly keep on that. It's hard. It's called nice guy syndrome, and it's just everyone does it on some level, saying things don't bother you. Like the deep sense, I had to stop saying that fixing global insomnia didn't bother me. It did. This is what I need to do. I can't be doing anything else, or I feel like I'm just repressing myself. It's kind of nuts, but literally, I need to be fixing global insomnia, or I'm repressing myself.
Then your child goes off and draws a picture.
How else could it be? I just was such a horror to be subjected to that I have to kill the enemy or it's not worth it. Total destruction of the enemy is the only way forward.
Maybe they put a lot of work into it, eh? Then they come running up to show you. And that's a real good time to give them a pat on the head and say, look, isn't that great? But you're pissed off because you were embarrassed. And so you look at it and you think, and that's all you have to do. It's that's not really worthy of my attention. You don't have to say anything mean. You just have to not attend in this manner. And then you got your revenge. And you think you won't do that, man. You know nothing about yourself. And you read in the paper sometimes these mothers or fathers, they do something brutal to a child. And I know I know how that happens. It's no disciplinary strategies in the house.
Yeah.
The kid is driving the mother or father crazy. And then maybe the mother or father, they're hungover one day and maybe they just broke up with their boyfriend or girlfriend. And maybe they got, hell from their boss who's a tyrant and they haven't stood up to them. And the kid does the wrong thing at exactly the wrong time. And maybe he's actually pretty good at that by then. And it's out comes Satan himself. Yeah. And all hell breaks loose. It's I wouldn't do that. It's yeah, there's almost nothing you wouldn't do. You just don't know yourself very well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the ability to set limits and to say no and to tell people that, it's not right for you to bang on my house at this hour and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That takes a little bit of toughness on your part. You have to be kind of willing to put yourself on the line. Maybe that person will get angry and hit you or something, or maybe the war will escalate, but you have to be willing to take that risk, because if you don't, then you set no limits and who knows what they'll end up doing. But a lot of this permissiveness is people are just basically afraid. They're afraid of any kind of confrontation.
Yeah.
They're afraid of any kind of conflict. And through conflict and confrontation is how you actually grow. It's actually how you develop as a person.
Hey, so here's a cool stat. This is really interesting, man. So there's been some great work on what behavioral markers predict divorce in couples counseling. Really solid work. Okay, so here's one predictor. When the couple is talking in front of a therapist and one of them or the other or both roll their eyes, there's a 95% chance they're going to be divorced within 6 months. And that's contempt. Eh? They've become so disconnected because they don't communicate, because the resentment has built up that they now have contempt for each other. But here's another cool fact from that research. So if you have people track the number of positive and negative interactions with their partner, you can calculate ratios, and then you can see what the ratio is that lends itself to the successful maintenance of a relationship. And so you might think, well, the more positive interactions, the better. And that's kind of true. So if it falls below 5 positive to 1 negative, the relationship is in danger. But if it rises, you have 5 to 1. And you can kind of see that because, negative events are more memorable.
Yeah, this is something I noticed. Like, men in relationships need to be able to say no to their woman and vice versa. Because otherwise, there's no respect, no mutual respect. Like, really, like, people think that conflict is bad, but conflict is only bad if it ends badly. And that's kind of the way I learned that from classical music, honestly. Beethoven. You listen to a lot of Beethoven, and classical music itself, it's like conflict. It's very, very conflicted, layers within it. But there's resolution of the conflict, and it's beautiful. And that's what relationships should be. If there is no conflict, there's no depth. And people need depth in a relationship. They need, to some degree, to have the sense of conflict and resolution. Some people more than others. Like, some people, like, need to butt heads. My wife, actually, in some ways, like, she needs to butt heads a little bit to, like, feel connected. But it's just interesting. Like, don't be afraid to stand up to people, think that they'll dislike you. It often makes them like and respect you more.
And more powerful than positive ones. And so, you know that if you read YouTube comments,
Yeah.
But if it rises above 11 to 1, the relationship is also in danger. And you could imagine that what you want in a relationship is, well, you want support and love, and you want most of your interactions to be positive. But you want your partner to slap you now and then when you're being stupid.
Right.
And then if they don't, out comes your inner tyrant, right? You're just going to dominate them if they don't push back. And so if you have any sense too, if you have a partner, you want to encourage them to put limits on you, especially if they're a little more timid than you temperamentally. It's like you don't want to run roughshod over them because they know some things you don't.
Right.
Do you know what's in your cheap protein powder? Well, here to tell us is all-natural fitness athlete Paul Sklar.
All right, let's see what we've got. Sucralose, artificial flavors, soy lecithin, ion charged protein blend. That's not good. Aspartame, soluble corn fiber. That's definitely not good.
Transparent Labs protein is sourced from grass-fed American cows and made with only 5 natural ingredients. So today I'm at Bill's family farm to show you where it comes from.
Cecil, Accessel.
Get that junk off my land.
It all starts with some of the finest grass-fed beasts in America. No, not them. I mean the cows. See, most cows grow up inside of a barn.
It's so cool.
I wonder if they have natural flavors and stuff in theirs, but the stuff they pointed out as being in there is actually very bad. You don't want that stuff. So definitely keep in mind, don't have that stuff in there. And I'm just writing down what I got to do today while I'm watching this. I had some ideas. So you guys just get some exposure to me, long form in this. Just see my thought process unfolding over a longer period of time. So as I'm watching this, I had ideas and write the ideas down. You can see that in the background as we keep watching and reacting.
But it's above 11 to 1. So that means too much positivity is the death knell for a relationship. And you want someone with some spark, right? It's like, well, what if I push you a little bit? Even teasing. Yeah. You want the person to be able to push back a bit.
And you have to be able to accept it as well, because some people probably in those situations can't stand any kind of criticism. They're so fragile that if the other person pushes back, it kind of escalates into a battle. So real strength comes from the ability in a relationship or any kind of really intimate or otherwise, is the ability to take that kind of criticism, to actually welcome it when people set limits for you and tell you that this kind of behavior is wrong. And then you can evaluate and assess yourself.
Yeah, unless you want to repeat it stupidly forever, right? I mean, that's the alternative in a relationship. Is I don't like conflict. I've been in plenty of conflicts, like plenty, way more than is reasonable. But I don't like them. Like I meet people now and then. I went to talk to Douglas Murray in New York City about a week ago, and we were talking about conflict, and he said, he doesn't mind a fight. And I've met lots of people like that they like that combativeness. And I don't really, but what I really hate is deferred conflict that escalates. It's like, it's better to get it over with now. And you're a fool if you think that running away from it is going to, like if someone cuts you off in traffic and they're obviously really angry it's probably better just to get the hell out of there because you're never going to see that person again, you know, and you don't want a situation like that to escalate because
they might have a gun or whatever.
Well, yeah, you just don't know what's up with them. They're really strangers.
Yeah.
But, you know, if
That's
you're dealing...
a really good idea. Like, I've run into a lot of situations like that with people. Just de-escalate. Like, you don't need to assert yourself. Like, just de-escalate. But let them know that you mean business so that they won't actually hurt you.
With someone,
I mean, I literally, like, just for psychopaths, because I've had people try to attack me in public, I just carry this on me at all times. It's very sharp, and I'm amazing at hand fighting and wrestling and boxing. And just gonna stab you in the jugular, man. Like, just because you're some lunatic psychopath with problems doesn't mean you get to attack me in public. It's just self-defense policy. It's mostly deterrent, though. It's just like, yo, fuck off. I'm actually dead serious. Don't come a step closer. And then I'd be willing to use it. I don't know. People should not start shit because it's bad. Violence is bad because then let's say I kill him and his family comes and kills me and I think my family has to go kill his family. My family would win, but it's not necessarily beneficial for us, you know.
Day in and day out, and they're pushing on the top of your head to stop you from growing, which I think Lucy used to do to Linus in the Peanuts cartoons. Yeah, because they had a dark side, those cartoons, man. The comics, they sure did. Yeah.
Oh, they would be canceled now, probably.
Yeah, they couldn't exist now, I don't think. Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, because a lot of Schultz's characters, Lucy was actually not a likable character at all.
Right,
and she was really oppressive to Linus, who was a good character. Yeah. And good humor always has an edge. But that you don't get rid of the negative part of yourself, especially that aggressive part, by pretending it doesn't exist. That quite the contrary. That just doesn't work at all.
Right. Yeah. I'm sorry, you going to say something?
I was just going to ask you about your new... Yeah. I wanted to ask you about working with 50 Cent and the rappers, and I wanted to ask you about your new book, too. So let's start with... So how did this partnership with 50 Cent come about?
Well, the book was very popular with rappers, as I said, because of the nature of the music industry. And he reached out to me. He wanted to meet me because the 48 Laws of Power was sort of his Bible, as he expressed it. So I met him in New York, kind of in the back room of the steakhouse. It was sort of like something straight out of The Godfather. I was kind of the one white guy amongst his whole group there. I was a little bit intimidated, to be honest. I didn't know what to expect because he has this reputation. Ended up, he was really nice and really interesting, actually a very kind of sweet guy, not what you expect. And I just finished writing my book on warfare and strategy, which is kind of my version of Sun Tzu's Art of War, how to strategize in conflicts, sort of like what you're talking about. And he has a very strategic mind, and we kind of had a really nice connection. And I thought, so much in our culture is creating these stupid kind of divisions and walls. Like you're in academia, you only write academic books. You're a popular person, you only write popular books.
Yeah. Politically, it says the society that separates its warriors from its thinkers will have its fighting done by idiots and its thinking done by cowards. I thoroughly agree with that, and that's the reason why Weak to Warrior is Weak to Warrior and why this all exists the way it does. Even me, in my career, I've always made sure to study a wide variety of different things while going deeply. Chemistry, psychology, neuroscience, physics, physiology, medicine, health, endocrinology, and more.
You come from this community, you come from that community, and you never communicate. And I thought it would be very interesting to write a book coming from two opposite backgrounds. Me, middle-class Jewish boy from Los Angeles, and him from Southside Queens. Something interesting could happen from a collaboration. There's not enough of that in our culture, I believe, because even though our circumstances were very different, our minds were very similar. We were thinking on a similar plane that kind of transcended these sort of superficial differences. So I spent time with him, and I was trying to figure out what is the essence of his power, what makes him such a compelling figure and made him not one of those people in Southside Queens who ended up kind of spiraling downward, ending up in prison. What saved him? And I determined that the quality he had was this kind of fearlessness. And it isn't the kind of fearlessness where you go beating people up or something. It's kind of an inner strength. He had been shot when he was like 20 years old, like 9 bullets right there through a car window. One of the bullets lodged in his mouth. And he survived miraculously. And it gave him this kind of calmness, like, I have nothing to fear. I almost died. Bring it on. I don't really care. And so I observed him in meetings. I observed that kind of calmness and how he could take over a meeting, not by being super aggressive, but just by having this kind of dominant persona. And I thought there was tremendous power in this fearlessness, not being afraid to be different, not being afraid to have conflict and confrontation, not being afraid of death itself, not being afraid of the reality of your situation, on and on. So the book that we formed together was kind of a meditation on 10 forms of fearlessness. And I found, I thought that I was a relatively fearless person, which in some ways I am. I seem agreeable, but I'm actually in some ways a little bit bold and adventurous. But compared to him, I realized, no, I'm actually riddled with fears. And just being around him and kind of riding.
I don't know about this. I always think of myself as somewhat of a timid person in a lot of ways, which is why I push myself to do so many bold things. But then I just end up doing more bold things than the people who think that they're bold. So then who knows?
In the book helped me a lot in my, kind of overcome some of my own limits and some of my own fears. So that's where that book
it's
came out.
Nice to have a model like that really close by, right, to contrast yourself with. You can learn a lot from. So do you think that fearlessness that you saw in him, you think part of that was a consequence of that brush with death? How much of that do you think was temperamental too in him?
Well, there's a kind of a reckless fearlessness that a lot of people from the hood have, which doesn't really serve them very well, and it gets them in a lot of trouble, right? He has a very kind of strategic, under control fearlessness.
Hey, I got something cool to tell you about that. So what? I was talking to David Buss. Yes, I believe it. And he's an evolutionary psychologist, a good one. We were talking about this Machiavellian personality triad, the dark triad.
I'm going to grab some chlorella. I like to take chlorella in between meals for a variety of reasons. Chlorella absorbs toxins. It's a very effective binder. And I find taking it in between meals alleviates brain problems that I think I get from bacterial problems I know I have in my stomach. And this helps all that.
Del Polo's UBC. Yeah, okay. So here's something really interesting. It's the bad boy paradox, they call it, that young, naive women are attracted to those Machiavellian types. Definitely. But when they get older and more experienced, they start to be able to see through that. The reason they're attracted to it, as far as I can tell, and I talked about this with Bus to see if I was way off on the wrong track, is that those reckless, fearless people mimic real fearless competence. And young women aren't good at distinguishing between the two.
I agree.
And so they get sucked in by the sort of psychopathic recklessness because they think it's fearless competence. Right. And then, of course, the guys who are doing
real fearless competence comes from mastery. The reason I haven't basically I didn't start doing insomnia coaching on a global scale when I was 18, 19, or 20 is because I did not have mastery yet. Did not give me the competence and the confidence to attack this on a global scale. But now that I have mastery, I now have the confidence. So real confidence comes from mastery. You have to build that mastery, and you build mastery, you get confidence.
That they'll prey on that. Because
also just fixing your brain neurotransmitters makes you very confident too.
They're trying to ape competence, but what the women are really after in their heart of hearts, they might be out for an adventure too, because there's that element of it, but they want that fearlessness that does go along with true generosity and competence, and also the ability to keep, real darkness away. So,
well, a lot of those people who display that kind of what you call mimicking fearlessness,
yes,
or whatever,
macho. That's the macho thing.
They're actually hiding the opposite. They're actually very, very riddled with insecurities. They're not.
Yeah, this is the thing. This is why I think Mr. Robert Greene is actually very bold, because he portrays the opposite.
And they're
and he's on YouTube and gets millions of subscribers and writes best-selling books that I've read for decades.
Create this sort of bravado and this false front, and they go to an extreme to kind of project this machismo, when in fact they're riddled with insecurities, and that's their way of dealing with it. But someone like 50 Cent, he's very comfortable with himself. He knows who he is. He knows where he came from. His mother was a hustler on the streets, so he knew the limits of the game. And I don't know, I think there is maybe a slight genetic component to it. I can't really put my finger on it, why he was able to have this kind of self-control where other people didn't.
Well, that dimension, neuroticism, if you're in a rough environment and you're low in neuroticism, that's pretty damn helpful, because imagine that what neuroticism is.
Like Nietzsche, having a why will help you bear almost anyhow. Like, the only way I was able to stay alive with insomnia was to say that I was going to fix insomnia globally, to give myself a big enough mission to actually motivate myself to deal with the pain that it took to just survive. Because you need some sort of story for why you're in a lot of suffering. Otherwise, you'll just opt out of the suffering. And that's not good, because then you don't get to get the gold at the end, the rainbow.
Unit of psychophysiological upset caused per unit of stress.
Yeah.
And or unit of danger. And some people overreact and some people underreact. Sometimes the overreaction saves your life. Sometimes the underreaction gets you killed. So it's not like there's a clear answer. So there's variability there. Some people are much more calm, not volatile. They don't withdraw temperamentally. And that's a more masculine temperament, by the way.
Yeah, I agree.
But if you're raised in a really rough environment and you happen to be emotionally stable, that's the opposite of neurotic, let's say, then you're just not going to be as affected by it. And that can be a real blessing. So, and then I'm also interested in that, you said that you channeled a lot of your shadow, let's say, into creativity. Did you see the same thing happening with 50 Cent?
Oh my God, his music is incredibly aggressive, and that's and to an extent it's kind of violent. And I must admit, it really appeals to me. So when I was writing,
why? That's cool, because it's so interesting that so many rap fans.
I had a friend in high school who fit this criteria very exactly. Look him up. I think he still goes by Cyrus the Rapper. His name's Ben Martin. He's a white guy who relates to rap. I mean, look up Cyrus. I think Cyrus the Rapper. I don't know. I think he's still active. Good music, though. He's got really good musical taste. Very talented.
Are young white guys.
I know.
Yeah, but that's really psychologically interesting, right? Because if they've been coddled and their ambition has been squelched and everything about them that's aggressive has been shamed out of existence, that's part of that attraction of that dark fantasy, right? And then they see that aggression manifesting itself, and in a creative form in rap. It's not surprising that they're going to try to imitate that. It's part of that desire to bring that shadow out of the shadows and into the light.
Well, I wasn't really, I was a little bit different in that I kind of understand, my own anger. I wasn't so much coddled, but what I really enjoyed about his music is it just seemed very real, and kind of the beat kind of catches you up in a primal sense, and kind of the aggressiveness just seems very direct and very refreshing, by the way. And you could tell. I say in my book, Mastery.
Right now, I'm just writing notes, and I'll share this stuff with you because this is interesting, and y'all should know this. So, on how I'm designing the new ad for the Insomnia webinar. So, right now, I'm designing the ad primarily for Google, because Google is search engine based. So, Google, not Meta, is based on searches. So, Meta advertising is based around interest categories, and then AI optimizes around that, whereas Google optimizes around search terms. So I can make the same video ad for Google and then run it on Meta, but it's harder to also be Google compliant than it is to be Meta compliant, because Google compliance, like, I just don't really understand the rules anymore, honestly. Like, it's just challenging. So I'm going to try to make the ad comply with Google, because by complying with Google, it will basically, I think, be able to reach a larger audience. And Google has the nature of people searching for stuff. So if someone's searching for a solution, then they'll find the ads, then they'll be in a search, like a solution optimized state of mind to want to take action and actually like fix insomnia instead of just being passively interested. So I'm trying to get people to actually like sign up for show up for the webinar and like fix their insomnia. I mean, these videos are all backlogged, so by the time you're watching this, the ads already have been running for weeks, and it'll be very successful, and there'll be many people attending the webinar. So there's a little bit of a delay, but this is what I'm doing right now. So it's interesting. So Google's nature of searchability will enable me to have a greater likelihood of finding other ideal avatars.
That by a person's style, by how they write a book, by how they put language together, or the music they create, reveals something very, very deep about their character, about who they are. And so a lot of rap kind of comes across as sort of false, like someone is trying really hard to have that kind of thug persona, and it's not real. But it really smelled authentic with him. And the fact that he'd been shot and nearly died, just kind of added to that aura. But there was something very real about it and very authentic in a culture where so much isn't real. I think that was the deep, deep appeal in a primal sense of 50s music. And when I was writing the war book, I was trying to get myself in a martial mood to write it. I would actually listen to his music.
It's a skill to present yourself as real.
To kind of put me in the mood to write some of the chapters. That and Beethoven.
I also love Beethoven. I'm setting the ad to Beethoven. Something that's this life-changing and world-changing needs to be set to Beethoven. That's probably why his Robert Greene's books are so good. Beethoven is a secret. Beethoven is a secret.
What do you like from what Beethoven do you like? What pumped you up?
Well, when I was a kid, one of the first albums, I was first kind of raised on classical music. Then I got into jazz and rock and everything. But I got a collection of his 9 symphonies. And God, there's a kind of an aggression and violence, like to the 5th symphony and the 9th symphony.
Literally with conflict and conflict resolution, this is exactly what I was talking about. I love the 5th and the 9th are my favorites.
It just kind of, like they used Clockwork Orange. There's something so overwhelmingly powerful about it, right? It just,
yes, the choral section in the 9th is like that. It's so
the Ode
powerful.
to Joy.
Yeah, and it's so, isn't that so interesting that the Ode to Joy has that primal aggressive force, and it makes joy. It makes joy is, in the naive sense, it's, well, you're happy. It's like, no, this joy is that integrated, terrible power that you definitely
speak to warrior.
Hear in superb music.
Yeah, yeah,
and when that choral bit kicks in, it's just overwhelming. It's like a blow and
makes you tingle. It's so exciting, and I've heard it maybe 1,000 times since then, and it still affects me the same way. And now, when I'm driving somewhere and I have to get myself in the mood, I'll still put the 9th Symphony on, and some of the other ones work as well.
It's like encountering the terrible force of good. You think about Moses in the burning bush, or Jacob wrestling with God. It's like, well, why is it a burning bush? Why is it terrifying? Why do you wrestle with God? God, why do you get hurt? It's like
you can pray to God and ask him to reveal himself to you, and he can. And I've experienced that, and I 100% understand what Jordan Peterson's saying. It's absolutely overwhelming. the holy fire that burns through you, joyfully destroying all that does not in the image of God. It's everything I've ever wanted. To burn with the love of God. And this terrible joy, this holy joy.
Well, because good in its full force has this has this integration of power. And it's no wonder it terrifies people, because it just burns everything away in comparison.
Right. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the new book that I'm writing about, which is the Sublime, is I'm talking about. It's a combination of two emotions, of both kind of pain and pleasure, of excitement and fear at the same time. So you're confronting something that kind of intimidates you, but is so awesome that you can't, you're just overwhelmed. And the confluence of two emotions, opposing emotions at the same time, is very, very powerful for a human being.
Yeah, I've just written a book that I'm going to publish next year that's called An ABC of Childhood Tragedy, and it's a combination of dark humor and beauty. It's the same. We're experimenting with exactly the same thing, that paradoxical juxtaposition of dark and light emotions. There is something sublime about that, and something awe-inspiring about that. I guess it's part of bringing what's dark into the light, or subsuming it under the light, maybe. So why the sublime? What are you pursuing there? And what's
the reason? The ultimate in sublime is, to me, so the way I look at it is, being a human being and being socialized is a kind of a world. There's a limit, a circle that we have to live inside, certain codes and conventions that we have to abide by, and we all do that. And the codes and conventions for 5th century BC China are not the same as what we have now, but there's still that limit. And what humans are attracted to what lies beyond that limit. It's just part of our nature. It's a first part of it. And when we explore beyond the social limits and codes and things we're supposed to do and ways we're supposed to act, it's deeply exciting and thrilling. But there's also that element of fear involved, right?
See, I think that's a better, what would you call it, formulation than Nietzsche's idea of will to power, is the desire to exist on that sublime edge. And
I agree. That's really, 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 really powerful that they said that, because Nietzsche's idea of will to power is contained within this, though, because if an organism being does not have power over his own existence, then he cannot truly ride that sublime edge. It becomes a mere sublimation. And we become sublimated beings who then turn our aggression inwardly on ourselves in frustration, again, following Nietzsche's convention of will to power. But I think the higher desire of will to power is will to power why, so that we can experience the fullness of ourselves and ride this edge that Peterson talks about.
And that is the border between order and chaos that you're describing, right? You want, and the thing, and that is the source of meaning itself. I mean, that's why I think music is so powerful, is because it plays with predictable forms, but continually adds that level of unpredictability, a beautiful.
I use that to derive lots of very powerful things. Music is very powerful.
You know how in any kind of music,
I use it to inform my jujitsu.
The simplest music, someone who's good at it, country music, there'll be a key shift or a twang on the string or something that,
or something discordant.
Yes, exactly, and then and integrated within sort of a higher unity.
I'm rather good at piano, and I can do this too. I love this.
And it's deeply meaningful. It puts you on that edge of the sublime, and we do find the meaning that helps sustain us in life exactly at that place. That's something more deeply real than anything else.
I want to have like a note to play this one, to play like more songs on the recorder in Irish Whistle, because I love doing that. And it's very accessible. Okay, I'm gonna let this section replay a little bit so you can listen to this again, and then when I come back, I am going to play you guys a little bit of stuff on the recorder and talk about that philosophically. But I just need to use the bathroom, so I'm gonna allow this to keep playing so you guys can have something on. So you guys are on long car rides or whatever, you can just have continuous entertainment because I know you guys like that. So I will go back to here and we can
wrestling with God. It's like, well, why is it a burning bush? Why is it terrifying? Why do you wrestle with God? Why do you get hurt? It's like, well, because good in its full force has this unbelievable, what has this integration of power. And it's no wonder it terrifies people because it just burns everything away in comparison.
Right. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the new book that I'm writing about, which is the Sublime, is as I'm talking about. It's a combination of two emotions, of both kind of pain and pleasure, of excitement and fear at the same time. So you're confronting something that kind of intimidates you, but is so awesome that you can't, you're just overwhelmed. And the confluence of two emotions, opposing emotions at the same time, is very, very powerful for a human being.
Yeah, I've just written a book that I'm going to publish next year that's called An ABC of Childhood Tragedy, and it's a combination of dark humor and beauty. It's the same. We're experimenting with exactly the same thing, that paradoxical juxtaposition of dark and light emotions. There is something sublime about that, and something awe-inspiring about that. I guess it's part of bringing what's dark into the light, or subsuming it under the light, maybe. So why the sublime? What are you pursuing there? And what's
the reason? The ultimate in sublime is, to me, so the way I look at it is, being a human being and being socialized is a kind of a world. There's a limit, a circle that we have to live inside, certain codes and conventions that we have to abide by, and we all do that. And the codes and conventions for 5th century BC China are not the same as what we have now, but there's still that limit. And what humans are attracted to what lies beyond that limit. It's just part of our nature. It's a first part.
It's interesting.
Part of it. When we explore beyond the social limits and codes and things we're supposed to do and ways we're supposed to act, it's deeply exciting and thrilling. But there's also that element of fear involved, right?
See, I think that's a better, what would you call it, formulation than Nietzsche's idea of will to power, is the desire to exist on that sublime edge. And that is the border between order and chaos that you're describing, right? You want, and the thing, and that is the source of meaning itself. I mean, that's why I think music is so powerful, is because it plays with predictable forms, but continually adds that level of unpredictability, beautiful. You know how in any kind of music, the simplest music, someone who's good at it, country music, there'll be a key shift or a twang on the string or something that,
or something discordant.
Yes, exactly, and then and integrated within sort of a higher unity, and it's deeply meaningful.
That's the twangs within this song, "Window to the Past" from Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. can tell I don't practice very often, but I'll just make sure to show my ass so you can see me play it a little bit, so I'm not neurotic about messing up. I don't really play, but if I relax, I'll be able to play it very well, and I want to do that because I love to play that song. It's the reason musicians smoke weed. It does help get in the mood. Being a little bit of a rogue here, but figure y'all like that if you want to integrate your shadow with Robert Greene, Jordan Peterson, Devin Young. Maybe even Poor Wayfaring Stranger. Hmm. Ah, the weed's kicking in now. I'll be able to play a recorder better. Let's see this. We get a little higher and then play some more for you guys because that seems to make me play well.
Meaningful. It puts you on that edge of the sublime, and we do find the meaning that helps sustain us in life exactly at that place. That's something more deeply real than anything else.
Well, so and sort of the ultimate thing beyond that limit is death itself. And the word sublime means up to the threshold of a door, or sublimin, limin being the limit.
Right, like
and
subliminal.
And so I've been meaning to write this book for 15 years and I got distracted. But then about 3 years ago, I nearly died myself. I had a stroke. And
I'm writing my book because I realized that I'm probably going to keep on almost dying or getting sick or injured until I write it, because that's what happens to everyone. Like Bruce Lee got injured before writing his book. Elliot Hulse got injured before writing his book. And George St. Pierre got injured before writing his book. And I think Jack Dempsey just got old. But him and Musashi are unique. So
just an inch away from dying myself. I was driving my car. And so some of the experience, the near-death experience, and what it kind of taught me and how it sort of remained with me 3 years later, and how I kind of feel it in my bones, and how it's altered how I look at the world and everything around me, is to me the kind of the ultimate sublime experience. So now, unfortunately, I'm able to write about this in a way that's actually very personal and experiential instead of just purely intellectual.
I feel like I spent so long suffering from insomnia that just made me very profound. Suffering tends to make one profound.
And
why, unfortunately, because of the price you had to pay for it?
Yeah, the price is I can't take a walk, I can't do the swim, I can't do the things that I used to love. So, I'm kind of, I can, I'm functional. I can walk around the house, but I can't take a hike, and I can't do my long distance swimming or my mountain biking or anything like that. So I paid a price, but I'm alive.
Yeah, well, and it was so interesting that it was in the aftermath of that devastating experience that you decided to turn particularly to the sublime.
Yeah. Well, it's because I've been wanting to write the book for a long time, and I knew that it has to do a little bit with the feeling of death, and
well, I don't understand that. So why that? Why make that as? I'm not disputing it. I just don't understand. Like, I mean, you talked also about 50 Cent's brush with death, but why does the sublime, in your estimation, why is it tangled up with the idea of death?
Well, because there's a limit, that limit, and experiencing the limit gives you that sense of excitement and fear at the same time. Well, death is the ultimate limit. And to have gone up to that door and glimpsed to the other side and literally felt it in your bones and literally feel your bones melting away as you kind of go into a coma.
Yeah, I felt that. From insomnia, I felt like my body dying. I felt that limit of death so many times. And in various psychedelic experiences, I felt that limit of the edge. And I thought a lot about that too. Like, should I be open about the fact that I've done psychedelics on YouTube? And I think I just should, because I ultimately, like, people aren't being open enough, and that's holding back the psychedelic revolution, or psychedelic, not the psychedelic revolution, but the therapeutic revolution. I don't really want people to widespreadly do psychedelics and just willy nilly. I think that's good, but I mean, in controlled environments and controlled settings, I think that the moving forward of awareness is good. And I think people need to talk about that for this to happen. Because if no one talks about experiencing psychedelics and how they're beneficial, then no one will ever gain interest in them. And it's just like, I get it. It's like awkward to put myself out there. Tim Ferriss has put himself out there too. Peterson has at points and acknowledged having done psychedelics. Tim Ferriss says he does them once a year. I'm going to recount this to kind of deflect attention, but also create a little bit of a circle. I'll probably point out lots of people who do psychedelics over the course of my own long form videos and me talking about my reactions, my stories, my plans, my thoughts and feelings, sharing this stuff with you guys on the internet.
Coma, is like I went up to that door. I actually peered inside of it. No other people have had much stronger near-death experiences. Mine was more of them.
This is interesting. I thought about, what if people take all my thoughts from my long form videos and make an AI chatbot that's programmed to be exactly like me? Would that be like stealing my soul? And first of all, it wouldn't be. But second of all, what if people took all of your digitized porn searches and credit card purchases and all that stuff and made a bot that just did that stuff? You know what I mean? Like, at least, like, if someone makes a bot of me on the internet, like, at least the bot will be talking coherently. It won't just be a purchasing, consuming, biologically driven machine. Random thoughts I have while smoking weed, listening to Jordan Peterson and Robert Greene. More so on the weed, just because I don't want to have a weed persona on the internet, but I do use weed strategically. And I'm just choosing to reveal that because I really feel that weed, caffeine, Adderall, nicotine. I have an Adderall prescription for ADHD, and I think ADHD is very real. I think people's brains are designed differently. I think that you can do a lot for ADHD with diet, and I think that that's good. I mean, this stuff is like definitely helpful to like diet, obviously, just very, very helpful for ADHD, helpful for brain function, helpful for helping you organize your thoughts, get your mitochondria going so your brain can actually like use energy properly to function properly. So one thing people, this is interesting. So one thing people will point out about weed is like weed makes your brain not work. It's like no, weed makes your brain not work if you're metabolically dysfunctional. If you're metabolically in a functional state, it actually has a different effect. Drugs have different effects depending on when and how you consume them. Caffeine, for instance, if you consume caffeine before eating, it'll blunt your appetite. But if you consume caffeine after eating a large meal, then caffeine will actually enhance your digestion of the meal and improve your appetite for later meals. It's a real thing. Like the effect of drugs changes based on when you consume them. So with weed, for instance, I like to use weed in conjunction with meditation. I like to use it in conjunction with playing music, jujitsu. I find it very, very helpful for helping me honestly disassociate from neurotic thoughts. Like in jiu-jitsu, just focus on my own body, my own structure, my own movement. Um, I also find it very, very useful for marketing. When I do marketing work, I will smoke weed and meditate simply because I've found that it is the single greatest way to get insight as to what people actually respond to. I don't know, for whatever reason, the way my brain works, when I smoke weed and meditate and think about people's actions and marketing work and sales work that I've done, I can make sense of it. Like I literally like used to be terrible with women in high school, and for some reason it took me smoking weed to figure out how to talk to women. But I wouldn't talk to women when I was high. What I would do is I would smoke weed and then I would think about interactions I'd have with women and people in general, just social interactions. I would think back on them and I put myself in the other person's perspective and I would gain lots of insights into why they'd acted that way because it put me outside myself in a very, very interesting way. And I think that if you're getting high quality stuff, like I consume very, very high quality stuff, like balance, like just cannabinoid profile perfect, everything perfect, no heavy metals, like ceramic oil, vaporized, not combusted in low controlled microdoses strategically throughout certain periods of time that it is useful. And that is very different from just like smoking weed to watch cartoons or whatever. And that's the thing I think that should be distinguished. Like people will talk about, like I've read all the studies on weed use and brain function, and I think a lot of it depends on like how you use it. Like for instance, like amphetamine. Is amphetamine good or bad for your brain? Well, I take low dose amphetamine, and I found it to be very, very beneficial for my brain because I take it at low doses in a way that's not destructive, at doses that's not destructive, at times it's not destructive, and it actually enhances things. So, without further ado, where's my recorder? Here's my recorder. So right now I'm starting to get better awareness of my body and how that's affecting the playing of my recorder. Straightening out my posture, fixing my facial posture, getting everything better. Just posture alone, fixing it improves everything. I'm trying to remember the song too. I haven't played recorder in years, honestly. I just carry it with me on the off chance I get the impulse because I'm very musical, but I've just been so focused on Week to Warrior and jujitsu, my family. Over the past few years, I haven't really played, but I love it. It moves me a lot. And these long form videos, I'm just trying to like communicate the ineffable part of who I am through these videos, because I find that what I'm trying to do is create a movement around ending insomnia, a movement of ending insomnia. I have already kind of created it, but I'm trying to keep creating it. Because you don't keep creating it, it loses momentum. That's one of the laws of the world is momentum. Momentum keeps the world spinning. If you lose momentum, you die. Human metabolism also has momentum as well. This is a huge part of the frameworks that I teach. But basically, I'm trying to be more open, treat this video series as like a hangout series, like the sort of feeling you would get if you were just a friend of mine. Because many of you are fit the demographic of people I would be friends with. That's kind of who I'm targeting for clients and people I do business with, because I don't want to do business with people I wouldn't be friends with. So creating the vibe of like this is a hangout session with me just sharing my casual ideas, very unfiltered, long form. I can be unfiltered because it's long form video, so there's not going to be like widespread panic over, I don't know, like I tend to be very controversial among social groups that I'm a part of. So I assume I'll probably be controversial on YouTube as well. But the goal of this is basically just very open, just being very open. But I'm going to keep trying to play Poor Wayfaring Stranger a little bit because I love that song. And it says, I am a poor wayfaring stranger. I'm traveling through this world of woe. But there's no sickness, toil, no danger in that bright land to which I go. I'm going there to see my father. I'm going there no more to roam. I'm only going over Jordan. I'm only going over home. I know dark clouds may gather round me. I know my way is rough and steep. But golden fields lie just before me. What God's redeemed shall never sleep. And I end up in tears. The significance of that song is that's from the movie 1917. Think about World War One and these young men fighting in World War One, and they played that song right before they rushed into battle. And I first saw that movie and heard that song right after COVID started happening, right when no one, like the first like few days when no one knew it was happening. And I was still on carnivore, and I was just like, I don't know, it struck me as very beautiful at the time and indicative of my journey through life, and now even more so than ever. I am a poor wayfaring stranger. I'm traveling through this world of woe, but there's no sickness, toil, nor danger in that bright land to which I go. I'm going there to see my father. I'm going there no more to roam. I'm only going over Jordan. I'm only going over home. Emotional goals: be able to sing songs that make me think of my life's mission without crying. That's a good thing, though. It's a good thing to be working on something that motivates you so much it brings you to tears.
Milder sort,
I'd
but
like to finish
still,
this video. I'd like to finish this video because it's important to finish things so you can actually get things done.
As far as near death experiences go, it's relatively minor.
Well, my coma lasted an hour or something. Some people,
that's nothing, man. Experts, they have comas for like 3 years.
Well, wait here. Experts, comas, talking about suffering. When did the past? that's a weird, interesting rendition I just kind of made up based on Window to the Past from the third Harry Potter movie. That I kind of tried to like turn into a hero's journey thing, encapsulating the emotions I was feeling while still remaining within musicality. I'm not very theoretical. I just like to whistle a lot, and then I take my whistling and I extrapolate it onto recorder. And I have a lot of experience playing piano. Without further ado.
Years.
Well, okay, all right. I could have had a more intense near-death experience, but it was pretty intense.
Yeah, it sounds like it was sufficient.
It is, but so the sense of life is almost too much. It's overpowering in its immediacy, and we humans try and kind of dull the razor edge so much so that we can live. But if you think about your mortality on a day-to-day basis, and if you try and actually experience the immediacy of life and how dangerous it actually is, and how it's fraught with all of these things that you don't want to confront, is very, very, very powerful. And I'm sorry, Siri just keeps hearing me.
There's one gift Insomnia gave me is I legitimately feel like I'm happy to be here because I recognize that I probably won't. Like I probably wouldn't be here if things had gone any differently. So I'm very happy I am.
So so annoying. So it creates. So when you have that, it's like the ultimate. It's a mix of they call in French the orgasm le petit mort, right? So an orgasm is almost like a little death, So that sense of it's almost too much, it's almost like death itself, like something so pleasurable can actually kind of morph into something a little bit frightening as well, something a little bit like you're exploring something that you're not supposed to be exploring.
You see that in the ease in which laughter and tears can be interchanged, right? You see that with children. They can switch from laughter to tears in no time. And, you can laugh so hard that you cry. And it's often, too, when...
One time after I did MDMA, in a very controlled environment, for weeks afterward, I felt like my heart had been ripped open to God and that I was a split second away from laughter and tears in the most sublime of ways. It's very beautiful state to be in. I felt that way also when not on MDMA or not after MDMA, just meditating, other points like COVID, after COVID hit, and the poor wayfaring stranger. Like literally there I was like sitting there like COVID hit and like listening to poor wayfaring stranger and the thing, it was just like what a fine line holds this reality together.
When you're crying about something sorrowful, that someone can say something funny and it'll switch to laughter. And that's all way down at the level of instinct, right? Where these, it's so interesting to see the opposites touch at that level.
Yeah. So the reason why I'm doing the Eleusinian mysteries, just to bring that back, is I have a chapter on pagan religions, on what I call the pagan sublime. And I'm trying to tell the reader that we don't have a right conception of ancient religions. They're actually very different from what we think. We have these kind of cliched notions of kind of mischievous gods cavorting in clouds and doing all kinds of naughty things that are very human, and just kind of almost a silliness to it, like, whoa, we're so beyond that. But actually, pagan religions were extremely serious, and they were based on creating, go away, Siri. And they were based on creating very powerful emotional responses in people. And that was what primal religion was about, or ancient religion was about. It wasn't based on texts, on dogma, on the written word. So the Eleusinian mysteries, because they're mysteries, because nobody ever wrote about it, there's no text, there's nothing written that we can go to.
In some sense, Weak to Warrior is sort of like this. Like there's a lot of like tradition and like effort that goes into creating something that you can emotionally connect with. I mean, first and foremost, because I need to emotionally connect with this because this is my life. But then also, I mean, it's not like my whole life. Like I have a family and I do things outside of Weak to Warrior. But I mean, like this is like my life's mission. This is like the thing I'm doing. You read David Data, Way the Superior Man. Like this is like the thing I'm doing right now. It's my life's purpose at this moment. So, yeah, like. I'm not saying there's elements of paganism in Weak to Warrior, but I'm just saying, I mean, like, I draw inspiration from the same sources, and I think the ancient pagans were, in many ways, embodied the best and the worst of us. And we can take the best and disregard the worst.
Yes, there's the hymn to Demeter that kind of maybe describes a little bit of what it's based on, but we don't know really what happened because nothing was ever written down. It was simply about creating this overwhelming emotional reaction in which you took the initiates to the edge of.
Yeah, this is very interesting. One thing I want to add, though, about the nature of why I'm doing these videos the way I'm doing them, basically because the future of YouTube long form content is, like people like me just talking stuff like this, long form discussions. Like people are still watching Alan Watts and Terrence McKenna and Jordan Peterson lecture series because there's such a lack of high quality dialogue on YouTube that can be consumed in the form of long form content that I intend to create lots of content for that space so it can endure forever ultimately. I mean, I want to make an imprint on the world that endures because I think we should all aspire to do that. One thing I thought about is that most of the people who are going to benefit from my discoveries about how to fix insomnia and health in general are going to exist after I die. So I'm just like, that's kind of crazy because that's just how the world works. It's a delayed dispersal of information. Like most of the world has yet to benefit from electricity.
Death, you made them experience death in life, which is the story of Demeter and Persephone. You were like making them feel as if they had gone into the underworld itself, and that created a whole new relationship to life. But I wanted this idea that religion isn't this kind of milk toasty thing that people think about nowadays. It was initially an extremely powerful reaction to human vulnerability, to our weakness in this immense cosmos with all of these very powerful forces. And the religious rituals were to actually mirror that and give you a kind of compensatory sense that you could control it, you could contain it within these kind of powerful experiences.
Well, it's really interesting to me that, you know, you've come through your analysis of the darkness, and then a consequence of that.
You can, though. I mean, even psychotherapy is that to a degree. It's supposed to be an experience that you use to control the forces within you, which are not too different than the forces outside of you.
Was to be motivated to pursue the sublime. You know, it's in the little stamp that I'm using for these kids' book, which I'm doing with this illustrator named Juliette Fogra, who's a real genius in my estimation. We made a stamp, and the motto on the stamp is "Through the darkness into the light." And,
wow.
You know, and there's this old idea that if you look into the darkness enough, you'll find something that compensates for it, right? That emerges out of the darkness that's greater and more powerful than the darkness. And that part of the looking into the dark side of yourself is you find the power that enables you to deal with mortality. And there is something sublime about that. It's so cool that, you know, all your work investigating and trying to integrate the shadow has led you to this what that your intuition has been gripped by the idea of the sublime. It isn't necessarily where you think you'd end up.
Well, yeah, a lot of the impetus for the book is another little bit of anger as well, because I always have to have some anger in order to feel the impulse to write and just discipline myself. And my anger now is about how people's worlds have become so tight and so banal and so limited, where they're just kind of disappearing into their phones, and their world is just sort of.
That's why I'm doing this too, to build community around that. So y'all want to be on your phone watching content, watch my content, and then come and meet other people who also resonate with this stuff. And then we build actual community around this to compensate, because the benefit is that you can now meet people who are like you, whereas before you couldn't. But you have to actually meet them. So I'm really creating a network for doing that in part.
Programmed for them by Facebook or social media, and they're sort of told what they're supposed to think, and they're kind of programmed.
Terrence McKenna said something great. He said, if you don't have a plan, you become part of somebody else's plan.
And at the same time, you know, what science is discovering about the universe and about where we live and about who we are is just so insanely mind-blowing. It's just absolutely it's sublime, in my opinion. And yet so many people are just living like as if they're sleepwalking, as if that, you know, I talk in one chapter about the unlikeliness of any of us being alive, any of us actually being here right now on Earth, and how just to be who we are, the odds against it are like 8 trillion to 1. I mean, even more than that. And but people aren't thinking about this. They're not aware of the awesomeness of just the fact of being alive, of the cosmos as it evolved, as things on Earth evolve the way they are. And so I'm kind of angry a little bit about how people are just not aware of this.
That anger again. That's one of the things I did as a clinician is to help people find their purpose was to help them find out what they're angry about. It's like, well, what's your problem? You say that to someone, what's your problem? But actually you want to know. It's like, because if you have a problem, then, because there's lots of things you could be bothered about, but you're not bothered about by all of them.
Right.
There's
Please, somebody help! My t-shirt, it sucks!
Put it back on and get on the table.
What?
something that stands out for you as, something that violates your sense of moral propriety.
Don't wear t-shirts, guys. Like, these. Come on. Like, women, actively hit on me all the time. It's, really bad. I don't even put that much effort in my appearance. It's just
let's say, that's your problem. You think, well, I don't want to have a problem. It's, yes, you do. You want to have your problem, and then you want to go try to solve it. And if you're looking for meaning in your life, it's like, well, what bugs you? Well, I'm annoyed at this and that. And it's pretty naive and low resolution and formulaic to begin with, but you could zero right in on that, and then you find the purpose of your life. And that's it. That's in that anger. It's in that anger, at least to some degree.
Yeah, and as I said, I can't write without it. I don't know why. Every day I have to feel a little bit of pinch of it, or like a little bit of edge of that knife in me. And sometimes,
well, you have to be. That's right. I mean, I find when I'm sitting down to write a chapter, because it's hard to sit down and write a chapter. It's a lot of work, man. And
one of the 48 laws of power: act like a king to be treated like one.
Writers always whine about that, but it is hard to do. It's hard to do. It's as hard as clinical work, which is the hardest work I ever did. And so, but I have to be. It's like there has to be a reason for this, to get me going to do it. It has to be important, and that means it has to be dealing with something weighty. And if it's weighty, it's gonna call out of you all your emotional responses, including certainly including anger. Certainly that's a tremendous form of energy.
Well, I don't know if you have the same experience, but I read so many books for my research, et cetera, and that's the main thing that I fault them with. There's no kind of energy behind it. There's no human behind it. There's no voice that's kind of screaming out why they have to say this.
Screaming out is exactly right. That's a great book, Screams. Like Solzhenitsyn's Gulag Archipelago. That's like 3,000 pages of screaming anger. It's like
the whole company is just screaming anger at Insomnia.
You sustain screaming anger for 3,000 pages. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. It's like being caught in a windstorm reading that book.
Yeah.
And that's that greatness is terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's going to be the way Weak to Warrior, the God Engine, will hit when that book comes out in 2025.
That's kind of channeling the dark side in some ways. Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, well, I mean, that man brought down a totalitarian state, at least in part. It's like you have to have a lot of force, and you think that there's not going to be anger in part to push back against. That's all that kind of petty tyranny that you were talking about in its most, what would you say, most rigidified and universal form. And one man, who decided he was going to tell the truth and harnessed that passion to his words, changed the world.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know if I'll have that kind of effect. I'm sure I won't. But
one man choosing not to blow his brains out and keep persisting for 15,000 hours to research how to fix this thing. And spend 5 years coaching to refine his plan.
But that's sort of, I want people to, I kind of want to spark a sense of almost the religious awe without an organized religion behind it. Because I think we have changed a lot in thousands of years, but there's something in our nature that kind of craves those kinds of experiences, and nothing in our culture is providing it.
It's the definition of crave. I don't think nothing. Music does.
Yeah.
Music does, man. Music does. And that music was such a mystery for me when I was a young psychologist. Like, music is meaningful, and you can't argue the meaning away. Like, it's invulnerable to criticism. Isn't that so cool that there's a source of meaning that's invulnerable to criticism? And then it's this harmonious interplay of beautiful patterns, predictability and unpredictability, and the integration of passion and movement, right? Because it compels movement. Think of people dancing to a Strauss waltz, right? They're harmonizing themselves with the sublime patterns of the world. That's music.
My wife told me that fashion was structure and movement, and then I stopped thinking it was silly. I really thought it was super silly, but structure and movement I can get behind.
Right.
It's something, man. And it's no wonder young people are so desperate for music, because that's where we have the sublime in our culture.
Well, that's where they go to things like raves or astral worlds and concerts like that. They want that kind of collective experience, that you used to get from like initiation rituals or kind of things in pagan times. I remember once I was in Nicaragua. I was a journalist. I was covering the revolution, the civil war going on. And the Pope was visiting Nicaragua at the time. It's 1984, I believe. And there was like 100,000 people crammed in this one square. And, I'm not by any means a Sandinista. I have no sympathy for it, particularly as it is now. But the feeling was that I experienced, I've never experienced anything else like it, of that crowd and that group emotion. It can be frightening too.
Well, something we can think about. That's it. Well, that's it. That's the thing. The Nazis were unbelievably good at bringing that up, right? And so you might say too that if we can't figure out how to harness,
I feel like our culture is ripe for a mass movement, so I'm turning it into a mass movement of health, which is what Week Warrior is going to be. Get on the mass movement early, guys.
That force in a positive way in our culture. We pretend it doesn't exist. It's going to come up in these underground ways because the craving for it is so deep. And the Nazis were masters of spectacle and fire. They were really good at that sort of thing. And Orwell was courageous enough to point that out. He said, well, we don't have anything with that power to combat that terrible, dramatic evil. But you do see it in a concert. You do see it in that collective. Well, you said you saw it in relationship to the Pope, and hopefully that's something good, or at least it's certainly a lot better than Nuremberg.
Yeah.
And to think that we don't need that, or that's just superstition, that's extraordinarily naive. Yeah.
I know. I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, look, it was really good talking with you, man.
Very nice talking to you. I really enjoyed it. These are things I never get to cover in all of my hundreds of interviews, so I'm very, very grateful for it. I've explored territory that I never explored before, so thank you.
Isn't that fun?
Yeah. Unusual experience for me.
Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot, man. Yeah. Sorry,
I must say your Maps of Meaning was a very important book for me. I read it actually to help me with my war book, believe it or not, for your notion of conflict and integrating internal conflict and external conflict. So I just want to thank you and let you know nobody knows about that because I haven't really spoken about it, but that book was very important for me.
Well, thank you. I'm amazed you read it. It's a hell of a slog, that book.
600-700 pages. And I can't honestly say I don't think I understood everything in it, at least at the time, but it was a very amazing book.
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad to hear that. And it took me, I wrote that book. It took a lot of anger, man. I wrote that book every day, 3 hours a day, every day for 15 years.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Wow.
I had to put my hands around my neck and say, God damn it, you sit down and write this goddamn book. I had to quit drinking. I had to quit having fun.
I know. Believe me, I know all about that. It took me 5 years to write my last book. I can't imagine what 13 years would be like. But yeah, I know all about that.
Well, good luck with your book on the Sublime. I'm looking forward to it. Let's talk again.
Thank you very much.
Let's talk again when we want to, but maybe when it comes out, that would be good. I really liked it, and I'm really curious about how you integrate your investigation of the Eleusinian mysteries. I talked to some interesting people about that recently, and
I know
I'm very fascinated in the Eleusinian mysteries, as is Mr. McKenna.
Written the piece when I heard them speak, and then I changed some things because I realized some things I'd written were
I feel like it was psilocybin.
Inaccurate. But what I try to do in that is I create a character, a woman who's going to the mysteries and what it was like from her first person account. It's fictional, but I'm trying to actually give her a history during the plague in the 1420s, and then go into the mysteries and what it would feel like subjectively to be in there.
Yeah, I had a vision once that the shamanic experience was an antidote to icy northern totalitarianism. So many people are going to the jungle now, to the Amazon, to use ayahuasca and that sort of thing. And
interesting. Yeah, I agree.
And that's certainly that drug use.
Psilocybin, guys, in controlled environments. Listen to Mr. McKenna. He has good advice.
That hallucinogenic drug use was tied up with those primordial religions in some profound way.
I literally met the Christian God on mushrooms. It's an option. You could just do that. He's there. Friendly guy.
Understand any of that even a little bit.
No. And of course, the Eleusinian mysteries probably had that drug element as well, because the drink they had was either mushrooms or ergot or opium, poppy seeds, poppy. So it's been demonstrated that all kind of pagan cultures had some kind of drug thing going on. And so
all right, well, good luck to you writing this book.
Thank you.
And it was a pleasure talking to you. And I certainly am much more clear about everything that you've been doing. I'm so glad I decided to talk to you. And
me too. Yeah. I hope I brought a little bit of clarity there.
Oh, absolutely. It was a really good discussion. Thanks again. Thank
you so much again. Say hello to your daughter for me.
I will do that, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, she's a big fan, and so is my producer, Eric.
Oh, Eric?
There's 3 very unpopular reasons why men who make over 150 grand annually need a six-pack, while men in this category aren't typically.
True.
Is this Eric?
Yes, this Eric.
I had no idea.
Hey, Eric.
Yeah, big fan. If you want. Yeah, big fan. Big.
Yeah, well, I was all shorted out when I was reading the Daily Laws. I thought, I don't know what to do with this. It's like, it's this, what the hell's going on here? And Eric, he said, well, he really liked your books. And
this is so sweet of Dr. Peterson allowing him to talk to him. You could tell he's like, because he could so easily just be, we didn't have enough time, blow him off. You could tell he's really making him happy by letting him talk to Robert Greene and introducing him. And
daughter really liked your interview, and I thought, well, I'm obviously missing.
Hey, I use the same headphones.
Something, and I didn't spend as much time when I was deciding about this conversation reading it but I had some sense that maybe you were doing a shadow investigation, but I wasn't clear about it. So, but they were big defenders of you. It's like,
that's good.
You got to talk to him. And
thank you, Eric. Thank you. I appreciate
of course.
that.
Yeah, of course.
Anything I can do for you, thank you.
No, absolutely.
Eric, why were these books helpful to you?
Oh man, fuck. Good question.
Hey, I swear to.
That's tough. There's been a few points in my life where, so I was a fighter. It was my first career choice as a mixed martial arts fighter. And so to me, knowing, like from reading the 48 Laws of Power, it's very similar to jujitsu. So when
Eric and I should hang out and do jujitsu.
I got into business, it was like, oh, I've seen this behavior before because I've read this book and I understand this. So it started as like a very interesting, it started just as an interest, like, oh, this seems cool. I think I saw you on Tim Ferriss's show or something like that. And when I started to see those things come into play, it then like completely hooked me, and I got all the rest of the books. And
so it prepared you.
Yes. Yeah. And one of the things, Robert, that I like so much about what you're doing is you're taking these principles, you're showing it throughout history, and you're giving examples of how this plays out today. And so it's like across the entire.
These books are really good. Like if you've never read them, like you gotta. Like I said, I've planned my career from the age of 15 around fixing insomnia as my path to mastery to make like it.
Higher spectrum of what type of thinker is reading it. You have to be the type of thinker that's going to read, which isn't everybody, but across that spectrum, everybody gets a little exactly what they need to hear in it. So it makes it very practical. You can then go off and be very practical with it. The same thing that you do.
That practical. Yeah. Well, it's really important. Like one of the things you learn as a cognitive behavioral psychologist is that you have to nail this down to changeable behavior. One of the things I was always doing with my clients was, and I've recommended this to people many times in my lectures, is find the largest unit of change that you're actually willing to do. Like maybe you won't clean up your room. I stress that. It's like, Well, friend, will you move one thing off your desk today? One thing, just one. Or if you can't do that, because sometimes clients would come back and say, I couldn't even move one thing. I said, well, why don't you look at one thing and think about moving it? And they're embarrassed because, they're so unable to perform.
That's smart. I should think about cleaning my office.
This task, which is a simple task in some sense, that they're ashamed to admit where they are to themselves, but they can't move forward. I had one client, this is so funny. He lived at home with his mother, and he shouldn't. He was too old for that. And his room was a complete bloody catastrophe, and he knew it. And he was probably mad at his mother for coddling him. And so he needed to vacuum the carpet. So the deal for the week was you go vacuum that carpet. And he brought the vacuum cleaner into his room, but he left it in the doorway, on a slant. And every day for a week, he had to walk over that vacuum cleaner. He wouldn't put it back, and he wouldn't bring it in his room and vacuum. And that's a good example of that underground resentment. You just think how angry you have to be at your situation to put a vacuum cleaner. It's probably a middle finger to me too. It's like, I'm not doing what that goddamn therapist says, that kind of resentment. But he literally walked over that damn vacuum cleaner for a week. And we talked a bunch about that. It's like, well, what are you doing? It's like, obviously you're angry. Like, why can't you do this? What are you angry about? Well, man, he was angry about plenty of things. Let's put it that way. So so that practicality, that's real necessary to nail the highest to the lowest and to get all that organized all the way down to practical, implementable behavior.
I'm familiar with the work of Milton Erickson.
Yes. What are you referring to specifically?
All of his work. I'm just enamored with his work because his ability to create change and his patience and the strategies he would employ, I just think are so brilliant. I don't know if he's respected in the field or not anymore, but I just thought his story.
Well, my experience with all those great clinicians was you're a fool if you don't take what they knew seriously. I mean, those people had a reputation for a reason. And there's, I really learned a lot from the great behaviorists. I learned a lot from the psychoanalysts, from the Rogerian types. Like they all had something.
Anyone who's put their 10,000 hours in
to say. The behaviorists were great at decomposing something complex into implementable units, man. And the psychoanalysts were great at high-level conceptualization, archetypal analysis, the big story, the big picture. Yeah. So, hey, Eric, maybe we'll keep that discussion with you in the video.
Okay.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
Sorry for cursing right away.
No, that's all right.
Good. That was perfect.
Perfect. Wonderful. What a wholesome and wonderful
Bill Gates
video.
has bought over 200